All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I know we still got some folks trickling in, but we're going to head and just kick things off. Really appreciate you being here. We're excited to dig into this world of construction audits with you. It just to be a good time. You should walk away some pretty good takeaways. So we'll go ahead and get it kicked off. So who are we? Well, I'm Chase Blakey. I'm going to be your host today. I landed at Infotech after a career as an officer in the Marine Corps. I started out on the product side of the house. And then I've come over to be an account executive. I'm focused on the Midwest. With me today also is Michael Helm. He's been doing this for a while. He's been at Infotech for about 8 years. He's got loads of experience helping customers adopt digital solutions to address their construction needs. And the information we're sharing today is a compilation of information from a few resources, right? So we've got customer feedback. Infotech's been around since the 70s, been doing this for a while. We've got loads of customer feedback that's helped inform this. We've got publicly available government resources we've used and pulled on. And we also have a lot of internal subject matter experts who've been in this industry for quite a long time, who've helped inform the content that you're about to see today. So we're glad you took the time to join us. And let's go ahead and knock out a little bit of housekeeping. Okay, so throughout today's webinar, you are going to be muted, but the chat is wide open. There's not a different QA or chat and all those whiz bangs. We're keeping it pretty simple here today. Whatever you got, go ahead and drop it in the chat. Feel free to drop in any questions you have as we go. Our team will be engaging in the chat, answering questions, saying hello to friends, etc. But we welcome a collaborative effort in there from you as well. So a lot of you guys have a lot of great expertise. Feel free to contribute to the discussion in there if there's anything that you think needs to be said. Any questions that we don't get to or that we feel should be covered for the whole group, they're going to be covered at the very end during our live brief Q&A. Any of those that we may miss will be included in a follow-up email, also with a recording of this webinar. So, don't fret. If you get disconnected for any reason, we got your back. We'll be sending that out. Okay, so today, I'm going to be setting the stage on this auditing business for us. I'll walk us through a little bit of what IIJA means for increased auditing vigilance, and then I'll cover down on some of the differences between state and federal audits. And then Mike is going to come in, and he's going to illustrate why the feds are pushing so hard for this ADCMS concept and how it can help make sure you're covered for any audit you may have. And then we're going to close out with the Q&A that I just talked about. So let's go ahead and get going. To start us off here, we've got a poll. And so the question here we'd like to have you guys answer and give your feedback on, you should have a window pop up on your screen. There it is. If you received a state audit today, how would you fare? So ACEs is obviously really good. And then pretty poorly is, I don't think I'm going to do that great. Give a second to let these results come in. And then we'll see what everyone's got to say. Okay. Looks like a pretty evenly distributed answer. I think everyone feels decently okay here. We've got about 25% of people thinking that they are just awesome and they would crush it. So that's good to hear. And a few folks in the middle, right? So the overwhelming majority saying, I think I do okay, but I don't really know. So yeah, that's good. That's helpful. All right, let's move on. All right, so here's just what I'm covering before I pass it over to Mike, right? So at a high level, audits exist for really one reason. That's to make sure the processes and procedures are being followed, okay? In the case of highway funding audits, whether you're talking about state or federal, it's a matter of ensuring the taxpayers that their funds are being properly spent, right? In other words, we as taxpayers are getting what we paid for. So the first thing we're going to do is let the past be our guide. We're going to take a look at how the 2009 ARRA bill led to key FHWA findings, which have sort of like set in motion a closer eye on locally administered projects. We're going to follow that trend through. And then we're going to take a look at the status quo, kind of the pre-IIJA funding status quo of spending at the federal level to give us a baseline of what is normal federal spending. And then we're going to check out how today's world, today's environment is different from that status quo. And then finally, we'll get a little bit more granular, dig into the state and federal audits and the difference in order to contextualize all of this. So let's dig in. All right, in order to understand where we sit now, we're going to take a look at the past to figure out, what can we expect in this sort of brave new world of IIJA funding we're living in. On this page, you're going to see a list of a few audits. This is basically a list of some of the audits that came following that 2009 injection of $8 billion with ARRA. Okay, so that was $8 billion of highway specifically spending. As a result, FHWA conducted a series of audits to check in on how this money is being spent. So as you see, the first event on this timeline is from 2010 to 2012. There was really a few that audits that came out in that period, but each of them were pointing to LPA oversight and stewardship. I'll touch on that a little bit later. Then in 2015, you had these projects that were still outstanding and they weren't closed out yet, but they were dependent upon ARA funding. Okay, so some of those projects were basically at risk of the funding expiring before they were even being closed out. And then in 2016, a little further along, you're seeing preliminary engineering costs. Then again in 2019, issues related to force accounts. And the feds did all of this and more. This is just a sampling, but they did all of this in response to an $8 billion injection into highway spending from this ARA bill in 2009. All right, so let's go find a little bit of context around that $8 billion and start looking at how can we build some semblance of a status quo. All right, so this shows a split between federal and state spending, kind of as a pre-IIJA baseline, where we see 75% of all highway spending coming from the feds, giving us around $50 billion. And we're using 2021, but the years are roughly the same in that same time period. Okay, so 50 billion, that's the number we want to latch onto here, that the feds are spending. Now, that same 50 billion can be traced, as you look in this chart, as 54% of their overall transportation spend. Okay, so in other words, that's the overwhelming majority. $50 billion of highway spending is the largest category by nearly a factor of 2. All right, so where does that put us today? With IIJA, we've seen an injection of $350 billion over a 5-year period through FY27. All right, this is a $70 billion per year increase to that $50 billion baseline that we just showed. All right, the regulators in charge of this have now experienced a 230% growth in their spending. All right, by contrast, with the ARA, we were talking about $8 billion. Okay, so many of the same issues still persist, but this funding has increased dramatically. And so what we expect is that the audits that came following ARA are going to look like a cakewalk compared to what we're moving into. And so we should expect the heat to get turned up in the world of auditing. And that's going to work from the top down. So to better understand this, let's dig into the difference between federal and state audits. Okay, so federal audits have a very limited purview. They're auditing the DOT to ensure they're following the correct processes. They're not going to look at the entire project line by line. They're going to take a small sample of items and computations and payments and final material certs for a verification and quality check. And it doesn't mean you can be any less diligent, obviously, because you don't know which batch they're going to pick. They could pick any batch from anywhere. All right, so let's take a look at these different pieces. First, they're going to know where it came from, who originated the data. Next, they're going to want to know who checked and verified that data. How was it validated? After that, changes happen on a project. Everyone knows this. They're going to want to know who changed the record. And then they want to know who validated it after it was changed. Okay, is it still valid in accordance with the contract? A couple other just kind of parting shots here to keep in mind for the federal side. Make sure the DBE and environmental compliance reporting is legit. They always care about that. A federal audit will also rarely dive deep into the project financials unless there's a major change, typically anything beyond the 5 to 10% range. And if a change order exceeds a certain dollar threshold, many of you probably know this, it's going to trigger a mandatory FHWA review. So keep that in mind when you're filing your change orders. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at stateside. This is obviously going to be more thorough. It's going to have a more granular approach. So let's look at the different components that they'll be looking at. Obviously, it's many of the same pieces, but just a different way they're going about it. So from state to state, like I said, you're going to see systems that vary differently depending on the DOT that you're dealing with and how they're conducting their own audits. But by and large, they're all tied to the same system. They're all going to roughly be covering the same categories, even though the processes may look different. So you're still going to need to cover IDRs, computations for payments, quantity tracking, materials, etc. They're also taking a deeper look at the financials and change orders. Things like, did you use the correct funding for your items? Are you tracking and reporting on multiple fund sources correctly? How accurate are your contractor payments? And did errors in design or execution lead to any change orders? They also care about project management. So did the contractor stick to the plan? Did they meet the expected timeline? Were there any delays outside of the contractor or owner's control? And did the owner or their representative track every aspect of the project properly? Finally, as you know, they're going to look at your materials management associations. The DOT is going to want to ensure you qualify for a final material certificate on your project. Okay, so for example, if you paid 1,000 cubic yards of asphalt and only tested for 995 of them, then you got to make sure you have your ducks in a row to get payment for those extra 5 cubic yards. So why should we care? Like, what happens if we mess this up? There's a few things worth noting. I think a lot of this is probably transparent to most of the people here, but I just want to point out a couple things that are really worth noting. So first is current funding. All right. The 2011 LPA stewardship audit was in that 2010 to 2012 branch on the timeline I showed earlier. The OIG looked in a pretty limited capacity at just a sample of projects from only 4 states. All right. So they had a really low level audit scope on this, but even still, they found $5 million in unsupported costs. They also found that 88% of those projects had at least one issue of noncompliance. Okay, so this is a risk of unsupported costs, obviously, for current funding. Now, the future funding, the second order effect of something like this means that your future funding is now in jeopardy. As an LPA, your status as an agency able to administer local projects is affected by your ability to comply with those requirements. Okay, so if you're showing that you don't have a good track record, that can jeopardize your future standing. And lastly, time. This is one, like, we could probably pull this, but I'm just going to ask if there's anyone out there who is still paying AEC firms for projects where maybe your physical construction was completed over a year ago, or over 2 years ago, or maybe even more. Maybe some of you guys are sweating a little bit in the palms right now, but obviously, extended closeout means more fees. And it's not rocket surgery, right? If you want to ace audits, you need to improve project closeout times, arm yourself with better project information to handle contractor disputes, then you need to fix it before it becomes an issue. And that boils down to the 2 things you see here on the screen. You need a repeatable process, and you need an audible history of actions taken throughout that process. The key word here really is transparency. The more immediately transparent your project is, the better off you're going to be, the less likely the auditor is to get suspicious. And if they show up and you got mountains of filing cabinets and paperwork and everything for them to sift through, you've immediately got the wrong answer. These auditors are usually senior people. They've already been inspectors. They know the workflows a lot of the times, and so they can quickly identify a good or bad process. The last thing I want to touch on here before I kick it over to Mike is this concept of a cognitive bias that's at play when auditors are going around and seeing what right looks like everywhere else. And the easiest way to explain this is it's a little cheeky, but if you remember, like, your science fair, you're a kid and maybe you're in 1st grade and you're really excited. You're doing this volcano project and you've got your, I think it's like baking soda and vinegar, and you got your paper mache and you're painting your volcano brown, and you pour it in, you test it out, and you're like, this is the coolest volcano I've ever made. Everyone's going to love it. I'm super pumped. My teacher's going to give me an A. You go to your class, you look around, and there's like little Jimmy and little Tommy, and they've got Jurassic Park recreated. Okay, they've got like actual water in a diorama. It looks like it was made in LA. There's toy dinosaurs. It just blows you completely out of the water. And so, Miss Jones is coming around and she's looking at theirs, and then she comes to you and, she kind of pats you on the head, gives you a bless your heart, and sends you on your way. All right. That is kind of what it's like when an auditor goes and see what right looks like digitally in other places before coming to you and judging your, paper-based process, effort. So I just wanted to kind of provide a little context there. The IIJA bill included over $80 million in grant money to help you get caught up to speed on this. So the money's out there for grabs. And right now I'm going to kick it over to Mike, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about ADCMS, how you can leverage it to eliminate any of the audit anxieties you might be holding on to today. Mike.
Thanks, Chase. Afternoon, everyone. So Chase has done a great job framing the challenge for us around what's at stake here, right? Billions of dollars are trickling down to the state and local levels, but if your systems of record aren't up to snuff, it could slip right through your fingers. And what we're going to cover next is how infrastructure owners can leverage advanced digital construction management systems to strengthen their audit readiness and hold on to all that funding. We'll quickly cover the basics of what ADCMS has to offer, real world examples of how this technology has impacted audit readiness, and some of the best practices for A+ digital record keeping. Now, traditional methods of project record keeping involve paper documentation at every level of the project. Boxes and boxes on endless shelves and warehouses. Imagine you've already boxed up and stored your project records, and years later a claim pops up. How long would it take you to find the records that you need in a scenario like this? I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was an office admin for a real estate attorney, and this was how they stored their historical case records. Anyone want to venture a guess on who they sent to the warehouse across town when they needed to review old cases? It was me. So I know what it's like. It's not fun, especially when the warehouse has no AC and you're in Florida. So now some paper processes actually have some method to the madness. For federally funded local projects, Connecticut established what they call the 4-volume method, where each type of documentation has its own binder or volume. So volume 1 was daily work reports. Daily 2 was testing and payments organized by pay item. Volume 3 was computations, and then volume 4 was pretty much all other miscellaneous admin paperwork. And every record in each volume cross-references records in another volume when they contain, related data points, kind of helping you piece that puzzle together. But according to the city of Meriden, even that came with challenges like the duplication of effort, greater opportunity for errors, the cost of long-term storage of physical records, auditing challenges. The list went on and on. And following that audit trail across volumes was a major challenge, and that's amplified for processes with less sophisticated organization. All this to say, as complexity of your project record keeping increases with paper, the level of effort needed to maintain it significantly increases. Whereas if you have something, like the right digital solutions in place, the level of effort might increase slightly thanks to automated processes at play. Now think back to the ARRA audits that Chase mentioned earlier. Most of the documentation issues found were related to a lack of detailed, accurate, or complete records to justify project costs. And to give you an idea of how serious this problem was, they found $5 million in unsupported costs directly related to clerical errors when moving data from one source to another. Things as simple as typos when typing data from paper into a spreadsheet. And these findings led FHWA to take corrective action in the form of Order 5020.2, which clearly defined the responsibilities and procedures for both state DOTs and local agencies to oversee these federally funded projects. Now, it also led to the creation of educational resources like the Federal Aid Essentials for LPA's website. Just a few years later, FHWA doubled down on their goal to improve record-keeping practices when they released round 3 of their Everyday Counts initiative, which highlighted e-construction as a crucial foundation for record-keeping excellence. So the highest authorities in our industry have already identified this as a problem that needs solving, and they're trying to guide us in the right direction. One of the biggest challenges that construction administrators face in meeting audit standards is managing the data, the documentation, and overall project tracking in a way that's comprehensive, accurate, and readily accessible. Advanced Digital Construction Management Systems, or ADCMS for short, are designed to provide all of this to streamline compliance and audit prep in ways that paper or basic digital files like PDFs and spreadsheets simply can't. And if you're familiar with the term e-construction and the principles that are included in that, then you already have a good foundation of what we're talking about here. And if you're with a state DOT, chances are you're familiar with Ashdoor Project as your primary ADCMS. Now, once again, the feds are trying to promote the adoption of these tools to address the issues of poor documentation and collaboration. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act included ADCMS grant funds worth $85 million over 5 years, specifically to encourage adoption of ADCMS tech by state and local agencies. Now, any self-respecting ADCMS tool will include all of the basic features needed for fully digital project delivery, like mobile inspection capabilities for directly inputting data into a central database, near real-time project updates with dashboards for key project KPI tracking, workflow automation for ensuring standard processes are followed every time, and digital document signing for eliminating paper and speeding up approval processes. There should be minimal paper involved if you've got the right solution in place. But in keeping with today's topic, the best ADCMS solutions will offer a suite of features that directly support audit readiness. Digital documentation and real-time data capture mean that nothing slips through the cracks, and funding tracking with source attribution ensures that every dollar is accounted for. Automated workflows ensure that every step in the process is documented with approvals, and milestone tracking keeps the project on schedule. So let's take a look at a few case studies that show these principles in action. When it comes to documenting expenses for quick reimbursement reporting, a construction engineering firm in Texas said that accuracy and timeliness of their ADCMS's reporting tools helps them ensure that clients are reimbursed for work covered by federal participation fund packages. They said every month I'd send the city the pay estimate package and the contractor's invoice to make sure all their items match. They were good with the package and never had any issues with reimbursements. When it comes to expediting project closeout, Clinton County, Ohio's ADCMS gives them the workflows that they need to close out the project as they go. They also said, if I have bid items that I know are done and the field quantities don't exactly match the contract, I'll do a change order every month and start closing out quantities as we go. By the time we get to the last bill, there's no real project closeout. It's already done. And some funding entities are actually conducting audits inside of the owner's system of record, eliminating that back and forth between auditors and locals, requesting and sending reports, and just drastically speeding up the audit process. The city of Maryland Heights in Missouri has MoDOT actually conduct audits of their projects from within the city's system of record. So these are just a few real world examples of how ADCMS technology is ensuring smooth reimbursements to locals, expediting project closeout with audits in mind, and maximizing that transparency and accessibility for auditors. And the one thing that all of these examples have in common is that they were all using Infotech's construction administration platform, Appia. It simplifies audit preparation by establishing the foundation of consistent record keeping practices. Those include detailed project tracking, document management with standard workflows. And because it's built specifically for owners administering road construction, all of the relevant compliance guardrails are already baked in, and it's all integrated together. Now, for federally funded projects, it gives DOTs the confidence to know that their local agencies are managing these funds properly. So much so that Iowa DOT has begun mandating the use of Appia on federally funded projects. And New York State DOT will actually reimburse locals for the majority of the cost of Appia when used on these kinds of projects. But an ADCMS solution can only be as effective as you use it, right? Consistent data entry and documentation are critical, as are standardized forms that'll prevent data inconsistencies. Routine internal audits are also a great way that you can test your team's preparedness and ensure that any issues are flagged and resolved well before an external audit catches it. In essence, strong foundational processes and data standards are just as important for audit proofing your project data. All right, now let's conduct a quick poll of the audience. In terms of construction data management, how would you describe your organization's level of maturity? A study conducted by FHWA and the National Cooperative Highway Research Program categorized organizations into three main levels of tech adoption. Level 1 was nascent, which describes largely manual processes, mostly supported by paper. Level 2 is intermediate, covers processes evenly split between paper and things like Word docs or spreadsheets. And level 3 is mature, and that applies for any orgs that imply dedicated centralized systems for these functions with heavy use of the cloud. So take a moment, reflect on the processes that you work through every day. Grade yourself. I promise we're not going to engage in any public shaming, so please answer honestly. We'll wait a few more seconds for everyone to get their votes in. All right. Glad no one chose choice 4. Looks like a pretty good mix. We've got some still at the nascent level, a few in intermediate, but a good proportion of the audience in mature. So any of the DOT attendees likely falling into that mature category. Now, construction technology has come a long way, and today's tools offer solutions that were unimaginable just a few years ago. From cloud-based platforms to mobile data capture, these tools are transforming how construction administration teams operate. They're reducing paperwork, they're improving data accuracy, and they're making audits far less painful. We've covered some of the basics of current ADCMS technology that are widely applied on today's projects. So let's take a look at how this technology is continuously advancing and how that will help with project management and audits in the future. Now, one of the biggest trends in construction right now is the idea of digital twins or digital as-is models of real-world physical assets. Now, achieving a digital twin requires that you have a link between the physical asset and the model that allows for the flow of real-time data so that your digital twin is always a mirror of your physical asset. And one way that Infotech is helping push this initiative forward is by geo-enabling inspections in the construction phase, so that serves as sort of the starting point for that link when changes are made to a physical asset. Now, it's just one rung on the digital twin ladder, but it's already proving valuable in its own right. Engineering calculations are still widely done entirely by hand, and whatever sketches and calculations your inspectors do on paper are part of the project record and could be audited. With digital inspection workflows, they're changing that by equipping field personnel with GPS equipment to automate measuring and calculating those complex field measurements. And there's a digital output that replaces those hand sketches as part of the project record. Great example is Minnesota DOT piloted this technology last year with Infotech, and they reported a nearly 90% increase in inspector productivity, and they were able to beat the contractor to pay item quantities, which was unheard of for them at the time. Now, because those sketches are now digitized and geo-enabled, you can actually visualize your construction data on a project map for greater context by syncing it with GIS. And now you've got your as-built measurements and coordinates together at the time of construction, which is especially important for any underground components. And all of that can be seamlessly handed off to asset management teams to inform maintenance decisions later on. So you get the added benefit of construction phase data supporting other phases of the asset lifecycle too. Now, all of these digital workflows and outputs are magnitudes more reliable and accurate than their paper counterparts, further ensuring that in the event of an audit, you've got the data to defend yourself. I want to share another success story of technology enhanced audit prep. CNS companies leaned into the advantages of technology and standardized all of its construction administration practices around an ADCMS solution. Hint, it was Appia. And it goes without saying that this standardization granted them efficiency gains across the board in how they collected, organized, and reported on their project data. But because their field data synced with office staff as soon as it was collected, quality control over that data input on the front end was boosted as well. And in their words, they said, we have the structure to get the same results. So if we ever get to the point of an audit, the consistency is there. I don't know of anything else out there that's as consistent for a site or civil application as Appia. So that ability to spot check their data as it's being entered gives them greater confidence in a smooth project closeout and audit success. Risk management mentality like this is a major driver for advancement in construction technology. And by making data instantly accessible, improving accuracy, and ensuring your data integrity, these technologies are going to minimize your audit risk. Automated workflows also mean that documentation isn't missed, while digital records prevent those documents from being lost or tampered. So now let's address the elephant in the room. When it comes to tech, AI is the #1 searched tech topic on Google, and it's exploding in popularity because of the immense value that it promises in terms of time savings and overall level of accuracy. And when it comes to audits, it's not hard to imagine how AI's natural language processing could basically analyze a construction project's database and generate instant reports for project managers just by simply typing in a description of the report that you want to see. Even with an ADCMS solution, you're spending some time looking for the report or applying filters to get the subset of a report that you want. With AI, you would just describe the type of report and any parameters you want applied, and it'll generate your report in seconds. If you've ever used ChatGPT, very similar concept. Now, if we apply this to the idea of auditors participating in your system of record, they could leverage AI to instantly query on the exact data points that they want for quicker review. And for funding recipients, AI could provide real-time compliance monitoring, similar to what we just heard about with CNS. The AI would essentially alert project engineers to potential audit risks at the time that that data is entered, instead of waiting for auditors to find them. Essentially having that spot check on the front end to prevent delays and costly corrections later on. Now, if you think this sounds like sci-fi fantasy, I want to give you just a few examples of where this is already taking place in other industries. Deloitte reported that incorporating AI into the review of hundreds of thousands of legal documents during the sale of a client's company reduced duration of that review from 6 months to less than 1 month. And the number of employees involved in that review went from dozens to a team of up to 8. So we're talking about an 83% reduction in time with a fraction of the resources. IBM Watson is an AI tool that helps companies maintain compliance with regulatory updates. It basically tracks what requirements changed and alerts companies to any anomalies where there's non-compliance with those new standards. So you can address those issues well before an audit finds them. And then in healthcare, AI is ensuring the accuracy of patient data to help prevent misdiagnosis, recommend treatment plans, and then accurately bill insurance. All of this is already happening today. So you can bet that it's only a matter of time before it reaches the heavy civil construction industry. Now, knowing that these more advanced audits are only a matter of time, here are a few key takeaways that you can use to help you prepare. When it comes to audits, defense is your best offense. Take what you've learned in today's presentation to assess your own unique situation, identify your greatest exposures to risk, and start building defenses into your tech stack and workflows. Get comfortable with digitizing your documentation processes. DOTs are already starting to mandate the use of ADCMS tools on local projects where federal funding is used. Examples, like we mentioned earlier, of Iowa DOT mandating Appia or Michigan DOT requiring the use of Ashtaware Project. Beyond just your tools, though, make sure that your people are all on the same page with consistent data entry standards and expectations so that you know what to expect with your reporting. And then finally, be proactive. Don't wait until you're stressing under the pressure of an audit to do something about it. Please be proactive and start mapping out your plan for how you're going to address this today. As we've shown, ADCMS is the answer to a lot of the challenges with satisfying audits. It gives you a strong foundation for your agency's specific processes to confidently take on federal funding and streamline your project management. I appreciate everyone for sticking with me. I'm going to hand it back off to Chase for a few final thoughts on all this.
All right. We have made it on this Tuesday afternoon to the end of the audit presentation, y'all. Thanks for showing up. I just want to tie a few pieces together for us and get us out the door here before we kick over to any Q&A if any questions are going to come in. I haven't seen it yet unless I check, but as we saw with IAJ audits, we're talking about $350 billion of funding. Okay, that's a huge injection. I think just the rule of common sense applies. Audits are going to follow that. We know that's coming. We've also seen with ADCMS, I think, Mike, you did a great job, addressing the importance of having a digital management system to tap into. The federal government has identified this as a future of construction management and the key to preventing some of the types of stewardship and oversight issues that they found following previous funding rounds and audits that have come. And it's 85 million out there for grabs. There's just so much to be said for having the data so that it can be used later for whatever else needs to be used for. And so the last thing I'll say here is Appia was created specifically for this. I think Mike showed some good case studies here, but it's specifically for this issue. It's for horizontal construction, and it's for you owners who administer projects locally. So naturally, if you're curious about audit proofing your organization, future proofing your organization, or if you just want to use it to make sure that you're tracking what needs to be tracked on your projects and you're not using it yet, talk to us about Appia. The easiest way to initiate a conversation is really simple. You can just drop any emoji in the chat. It can be your favorite one. It can be your least favorite one. If you don't know how to drop an emoji, you can just say me or whatever you want. We can track it down. We can get in touch with you just to start a discussion and explore what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. And maybe Appia is a good fit. Maybe it's not, but it's at least worth that exploratory conversation. So go ahead and drop anything in the chat that you have. And then I need to pull up any QAs we have. I haven't seen anything come in. So since I haven't seen anything roll in just yet, what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and shut it down. We can shut it down early, give you guys back your time. And I appreciate everyone showing up today. I think we covered a lot of stuff, but be sure to drop an emoji or something in the chat if you need to. If you're too shy to talk to us, and you're not really sure you want to reach out just yet, there's that nifty little QR code in the bottom right, so you can use that as well. Scan that in with your phone, visit the website, tour Appia for yourself, and then everyone else, just be on the lookout for that follow-up email with a recording, a Q&A summary, and a link to the survey to help us get even better at delivering these webinars than we already are. Thanks.